So let's take a quick look at circuits. Today we're in the MB339. These are some basic principles about circuits. We're using this jet because it's a basic trainer, and it's a jet trainer. And that's what we all want to fly, jets. The numbers and speeds we're going to use will be same as I would use for a Hawk T1, T1A that I used to fly back in the day, but this is very, very similar in terms of speed and performance, certainly at the low end. So we're running in from initials on the dead side, and this will be for a normal join. The dead side is not the live side. The live side is where everything's going on. In this case, it's a right-hand circuit, so the dead side is the left-hand side as we approach the airfield. We don't run down the overhead, so to speak, down the runway. We run down the left-hand side. And if you had a formation who were in close echelon on the left, then that's what you'd expect. You'd all be braking to the right. It does get a little bit different when you do a nice close arrow heavy side left, but that's some more Brit tactics we'll talk about another day. As we run in from initials, air traffic control will give us some vital information. The runway, the wind, and who else is in the circuit. Lucky us today, very little wind, and what there is down the strip, and there's nobody else in the circuit. But if there was, we'd have to make sure we could identify where they are and try and fit our pattern into theirs. They've got right of way. So there's nobody in the circuit. We're going to turn at the end of the runway. Now this is a normal join, not your rip-roaring 500 knots, 100 foot break into the circuit on the Buffet or max AOA. This is joining at around pattern speed or slightly above. So that's not to say we can't do a run-in and break, but let's master the circuit first. Let's not run before we can walk. The key points that we're going to look at are all based on a 300 foot point. That's a point about a mile out on the extended centerline where you want to be at 300 feet. So for a standard circuit of 1,000 feet QFE, your height to lose is 700 feet. Halfway round needs half of that loss, 350. Add your 350 to the 300, gives you 650 halfway round. We don't calculate that every time. I'm just proving to you that's the geometry. When we get our beam, our 300 foot point, we pitch into the turn and then apply the full flap if you have any remaining. Go into the turn first and apply the full flap. You'll get a gentle pitch up, and in fact that will help pull you into the turn. Keys we're looking for here, and this is crucial, 650 feet halfway round. Aiming to be at 300 feet at your 300 foot point. In this instance, somewhere between 130 to 150 knots, and then slowing to your final approach speed. Once we've gone over that 300 foot point, we're now looking at a visual sort of a scan pattern. Runway, speed, runway, speed, runway, speed. Other types of aircraft use AOA. We're not using that in this instance, aiming to touch down on the numbers. So this approach was for a touch and go. So up goes the engine. Good checks to get used to. RPM leads TGT, shows you're not in surge. Raise the nose, lift the airplane off, gear up, flap up. Flaps all the way up, unless your aircraft type specifically says don't. In fact, some fighter types say leave the gear down to avoid wear and tear. When we get to about 500 feet, that's when we're going to turn into the downwind position again, checking for where everybody else is, and also just take a handful of power off. It keeps everything under control, and then we're going to use our attitude now to control your airspeed and your altitude. So if you find that you're ballooning a little bit and getting high in the turn just as you're trying to level off, just roll on a bit more bank, and that massive lift vector coming out of the top of your canopy, the bit that's arcing vertically will be less. So it'll help you around the turn and it will stop you climbing. Then roll out on your downwind heading, exactly as you used before, set the downwind power, do your checks, call downwind. And so here we are again, at the start of the downwind leg in our academic circuit pattern. It's a recognised position, and it's where we ended up after our initial turn, you remember? So just to reiterate then, important points on this final circuit. The downwind heading is important. You need to get your spacing right, but also the wind will affect your downwind leg. Get your flaps out, your gear out, do your checks, choose your 300 foot point. Check your power. Make the turn, apply full flap, check your power, check the gear and the flap is down, make your final call. Over your 300-foot point, and now slowing to our final approach speed. Runway speed, runway speed, runway speed. Fighter aircraft will fly quite a shallow approach. Some of them fly 2.5 degrees to 3 degrees, and that's okay. We're doing this visually, aiming to land on the numbers. We're not flying airliners yet, so we put it down on the numbers, which means the PAPIs will go into 3 reds, possibly 4. And this one is for a full stop. Things will be slightly different when you go and fly the big heavy fighters. Your circuits will have to be wider. You may only have one flap setting, or no flap setting at all, it's all automatic. Think of your Mirage 2000 or your F-16. You most likely will fly angle of attack all the way around the corner, or at least on that final stages on a set value. Carrier landings obviously completely different. That's a backside approach. You can go and Google it, go read it. That's when you are yanking and wanking the power around. Different type of approach, not what we're looking at here. And also the fighter aircraft, the big ones at least, can be quite a handful in the circuit, particularly if you look at the F4. So you need to get these parameters correct. But either way, always have a halfway height. So for us, flying Royal Air Force style, British military style, 650 feet halfway around for the usual 1,000-foot circuit. And one last thing, get those skills sharpened up. Do it in a jet without a flight path marker, without a head-up display. Or if you've got one and you don't want to fly anything else, try it with the HUD turned off. That's a real test of how you're flying parameters. Are you chasing parameters or controlling the parameters? Circuits are fundamental to get the aircraft back on the ground, but it's also a useful aspect to hone your piloting skills. Yes, it's a bit of an exercise sometimes, but you do need to know how to do them because you do need to fly the jet back safely. Anyway, happy landings. Let me know how you get on.